Last week we shaped the crown of the hat, and now it's time to work on the body of the hat and the brim. And that's the fun part. When it comes to the body of the hat, you can make it look any way you want. You can work with different colors, you can work in solid color, you can simply knit all stitches in every round and get a stockinette stitch hat, or you can choose a different stitch pattern. I want to add a bit of a swirl to my hat, and I'm gonna work in this stitch pattern. I have a swatch over here. It's one of the stitches in the PDF that I made of the 12 stitch patterns that work great for a hat like that. You can download that PDF when you click the link in the description. So this stitch is quite easy. It's knit and purl, and it has those little swirls kind of going round and round the hat, and I like that, and that's the stitch I'm gonna use. So right now, when I know that the crown is well shaped and it has the length that I need, the circumference I need, right now I'm gonna start working on this in this stitch pattern right away. This stitch has a repeat of 3 stitches and 3 rounds, and I will start working on the first round, and this round is going to be special for me because this will be the round where I remove the stitch markers. If you work in finer yarn, then you can work one plain round, simply knitting all stitches and removing the stitch markers, but I won't do that because I'm making a small hat in chunky yarn, so every round counts. That's why I'm gonna kind of combine these 2 rounds, and I'm gonna work in stitch pattern and remove the markers in the same round. The first round of the stitch pattern instructs me to purl 1 stitch and knit 2 stitches. So this is the beginning of my round, and I start with the purl 1, knit 2, purl 1 and knit 2. And when I come to the marker, that's going to be in just 2 stitches. So I purl 1, knit 1, I see the marker, I remove it, put it aside, and then knit another stitch that is that is my stitch pattern. So purl 1, knit 2, and I'm gonna do that till the end of the round. And that's my last pattern repeat, purl 1, knit 2. The first round is done, and see what happened. I don't have any stitch markers left aside from the one that marks the beginning of the round. The others are gone because we don't need them anymore. And then continue working in the stitch pattern of your choice until, that's the interesting question, until you get to the length of the hat that you need, less the length of the brim part, if you decide to make a brim. For more information about that planning, go to the link below, and then you will see how to get that length of the hat number depending on whether you want to make a slouchy hat or not. I'm gonna make a regular hat because it's for a toddler, so it should sit tight on the little head when it's moving all the time, right? So my length will be the one that is mentioned in the chart I showed you, this chart that you can also download on the website. And my length will be 18 centimeters, that's about 7 inches. But I want to make a brim, so it's going to be about 4 centimeters. So I take 4 centimeters from the 18, and that will give me 14 centimeters. And that means I keep working in the stitch pattern until my hat measured from the top of the hat, from the cast on, to the bottom of my needles, until that measurement equals 14 centimeters. It's far from there, so I have to make quite a few more rounds, and you do the same. Determine the length of the hat that you want to make depending on how you want it to look, and like I said, follow the link in the description, and that will give you all the instructions about how to do it and determine that number B, as I call it, and then decide whether you want to make a brim or not. And if you do, then decide how long it would be, and then take that measurement of the length of the hat, and that will give you the measurement that you have to get while working in the stitch pattern. And I'm going to continue the second round of my stitch pattern. It tells me to knit 1, purl 1 and knit 1. So that's what I'm going to do, knit 1, purl 1 and knit 1. I'm not going to continue explaining how this pattern works because I won't take your time, and you can easily download this pattern if you like it and follow the instructions in that PDF. Like I said, once again, I mentioned that link in the description. That's where you get all the information and all the downloads. Keep working in the stitch pattern until you finish the body of the hat, until you get that measurement that we've just discussed, and we will be ready to start working on the brim. And this is going to be my last round. How do I know that? Well, I measured, and my measurement from the top of the hat to the bottom of my needles is about 14 centimeters. It's a bit bigger actually, but it's okay because the hat is chunky, so I want it to sit really low, and I think I will make it 1 centimeter or so more. The key thing is the last round is important for several reasons. The first of the reasons is when you work the last round, think about the brim. Think about how you want to make it if you decide to make it. If you want to make it the hat without the brim, then simply continue working until your measurement is the full length of the hat. That's going to be the number B that we discussed before. For me, I'm going to make the brim. That's why I stop here and I think whether I want to make that brim a bit tighter. If that's the case, I would change to a smaller size of the needles in the last round. So I won't work on the 8mm US 11 size, but I'll work on like 7 or whatever. It depends on how much tighter you want it to make. Another thing is plan how the brim would work with the stitch pattern of your choice. In my case, it's not really a big issue at one point because the stitch pattern is pretty consistent. So whenever I stop the stitch pattern, I'm okay to start working on the brim. For other stitch patterns like this swatch over here, it matters because it's not the matter of life or death, so don't take me wrong, it's nothing really serious. But if you want the hat to look nice with a stitch pattern like that, you work from here and then you come to a certain point where you feel that it will be better to start working on the brim. And with this stitch pattern, this point is after 2 purl rows. Even though the pattern repeat is 4 rounds, 2 purls and 2 knits, I suggest you stop after 2 purls and start working on the brim over here because it will look much nicer if the ribbing starts from this point as opposed to when it starts after the knit rounds. It's just the matter of the general look of the hat, but we want to make it nice, right? So it's better to think about things like that. In my case, like I said, it's not really a big deal because the pattern is more or less consistent, doesn't have those ridges or any other design elements. Another thing is the brim is usually worked in ribbing, and there are different types of ribbing. So you might work in knit 1 purl 1, knit 2 purl 2. It's totally up to you. But then again, at this point, when you work your last round of the main pattern, you need to think about that. In my case, the pattern has three stitch repeat. One of them is purl and 2 knits. So that means that for me, it probably makes more sense to make the ribbing that has 1 purl and 2 knits. And that's what I'm gonna do. So I know this is my last round of the main pattern, and I'm gonna move to working the brim. That's gonna be about 5 rounds of ribbing. And not only I know that I'm gonna work in the knit 2 purl 1 ribbing, I also want to place it so that the knits kind of flow into knits and purls flow into purls. This way it will look better, more consistent, and I like it more. Again, it's not the matter of life or death. Your hat will still be pretty nice, but if you want to fiddle some more, I give you tips on where to fiddle, right? So I know I'll be working in the ribbing that would be knit 2 purl 1, but I'm not gonna knit 2 and purl 1 right now because I see that I have a purl here. So what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna knit 1, then purl 1, and knit 1 again. So that's my ribbing pattern. And it's the same knit 2 purl 1, but I just rearranged them slightly to make sure that they look nicer and they work better with the main pattern. And I'm gonna do it throughout the whole round. Knit 1, purl 1, and knit 1. And then I'll show you just one more repeat, and I'll show you how it looks. See, it looks nice. It looks nice because it seems that those swirls, they kind of stop at the ribbing and they change the direction and they go straight down the hat. I mean, it's just a visual, effect. It's nothing technical, but when you think about things like that, when you do a bit of planning, just a slightly bit of planning, that improves the look of your project a lot. And I'm going to work through this round, and then I think it will take 4 more rounds until I finish the brim, and I'll see you then. And here we go, the last stitches of the brim, the ribbing part, and I'm all done. So the hat is nice, I like it, even though it's a bit smaller for the chunky wall scale, but still it looks nice, and I think it's gonna sit nicely on a toddler's head, the one that I have in mind. That's a little girl with a heap of beautiful curls. That's why I made the hat a bit wider, and I made it slightly bit longer. So when I measured from here, actually I'm gonna show you. When I measure from the top of the hat up to the needles, I've got about 20 centimeters, which is about 2 centimeters more than I expected, that I planned initially. But when I started working on the hat, I realized it's chunky. So chunky wool takes that extra, space for thickness, and I decided I'd better make it a couple centimeters longer to make sure that it fits nicely and it sits quite low on the forehead, because it's a nice winter hat and I want that little girl to be warm. So now that we are happy with the brim, with the length of the brim and the length of the hat, we know that we are almost done. It's time to bind off stitches, and I suggest we do it in pattern to avoid that chain, the plain chain of stitches. But if you like that plain chain of stitches, that's fine too. You can simply knit all stitches and leave them as that, but I prefer to have that chain on the top of stitches and not to be that obvious. So I'm gonna bind off in pattern. That means I knit the stitches that I knit and purl the stitches that are purled. So I'm gonna knit this stitch, then purl the next stitch, and then pass one stitch over the other. Don't make it tight, because this is gonna sit on the forehead, and this kind of bind off is not really stretchy, and that's one thing I would improve. And next week, just a spoiler alert, next week we're gonna discuss several stretchy bind offs, but for now let's just use a regular bind off. But I'm gonna do it in pattern. That's why I'm knitting the knits and purling the purls, and I'm gonna do it till the end of the round. And here we go, all stitches are bound off. I put the needles aside, I don't need them anymore, and I have that one loop left, so I'm gonna cut the yarn and then pass the tails through the loop like you usually do when you bind off stitches. Here we go. Here are a few things we want to fix. First, let's remove that stitch marker. We don't need it anymore. So that little guy could go. Then we have that pretty ugly gap, I would say, but that one is easy to fix with a wool needle. So thread that tail into a wool needle, and then find the first stitch that you bound off. This one is right here for me. And with the wool needle, go under the both legs of that stitch, and you go from right side to wrong side. That's very important. And pull the yarn through. Don't pull it too tight. Let this strand be about as big as the stitch itself. This way it will blend in seamlessly. And then you insert the wool needle into the last stitch you bound off, this one, but you go only under one leg, like this. And pull it through. And see what happened? We created a loop that is very similar to the other stitches. And this way no one will ever see where the bind off ended. And now that while we have the yarn tail in the needle, we're gonna weave it in. So hide it somewhere. For me it's not really a big deal because I know that the tail will stay put in the chunky wool. It helps though to split the yarn here and there to make sure the tail doesn't get out. Okay, so one of the tails is hidden, and you trim it, and then there is just one tail left to hide, and this one is going to be right here, but on the wrong side. So you turn the hat inside out, find the tail and weave it in. Try not to create a big bulk where you weave the tails in, because there is some good news. Because the hat is made in the round, it's reversible. Depending on the stitch pattern of your choice, you can wear it this way too. See? This way it looks nice, then you turn it inside out. This way it also looks nice because it doesn't have any seams. It's good. It's good to wear any way you like. And here you go. That's your top-down hat, and now you know how to make it in any size with any stitch pattern for anybody. And here it is, our beautiful hat, designed from scratch and knit from the top down. There is only one thing I would like to improve here, that's the bind off. I would really want to make it stretchy, and next week I'll show you several ways to do it. So stay tuned, I'll see you next Thursday.